Hey y'all, this week we are going to dive into a DBQ or a document-based question project. We did this with Valley Forge earlier this quarter. So today we're going to look at what was Harriet Tubman's greatest achievement. We're going to break this down a little bit so that it's not so overwhelming at once and it will span over a couple week period. This is the first part of it. It is the intro to give you a little bit of background on Harriet Tubman and her achievements. I added a blurb here, just going over exactly what I said prior about how it's very similar to the Valley Forge. And then our step 1. So I want you to look at the code words over on the left. And what you're going to do is try to figure out the definitions of those words. Once you have done that, you can either highlight this area and it will reveal the words, or if you click on this, you'll see the paint can up here. If you click on this, you'll see the paint can up here, and you can change your background color to be transparent so that you can see the words. Once you have done that, you can scroll down and fill out part 2. Now, part 2 and part 1 connect, so you read this sentence, and in your own words, you're going to decode it. But with some of these words, you can use the definitions in part 1 to help you answer this and fill it in yourself. So, for example, it is a long haul from Egypt to New Canaan. So, haul, you automatically think, oh, maybe a trip. So, it's a long trip from, and then we'll go up here and you'll see where land of Egypt is and what that is. And you'll also see New Canaan and what that definition is. That's how you're going to decipher that code. We'll scroll down a little bit and you're going to get a background essay. Now, for the Valley Forge one, we all read it aloud to you. This one I'm going to put in here as well as read it aloud so that you can take a moment to think about them. You're going to analyze this piece of writing and answer questions. So our background essay. What was Harriet Tubman's greatest achievement? The place was Dorchester County, Maryland, the year of 1822 or thereabouts. The event, little Arminta Ross was born into slavery. From the beginning, it was clear she was tough. At 5 years of age, Minty Ross was hired out to do childcare. By the age of 12, she was doing field work and hauling logs. In Minty's own words, I grew up like a neglected weed. Despite a loving mother, these were hard years. Like so many slaves, Arminta lived with the fear that she would be separated from her family. After the Atlantic slave trade ended in 1808, great pressure was put on Maryland's eastern shore to provide slaves for the cotton fields in the deep South. Historians estimate that at this time, 10% of young slaves in the upper South were sold away from their families. We know at least 2 of Minty's sisters met this fate. In 1844, Minty married a free black man named John Tubman. This did not alter Minty's slave status, but it did lead to a name change. Taking her mother's first name and her husband's last, Minty Ross became Harriet Tubman. I'll scroll down. When her master died in 1849, Harriet made a life-changing decision. I had reasoned this out in my mind. There was one of 2 things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other. Harriet decided to run. It was about 100 miles from Harriet's slave home near Bucktown, Maryland, to the Pennsylvania border, and another 20 miles to Philadelphia. Unable to persuade her husband to join her, Harriet took off on her own. Scroll up. She never disclosed the details of her escape. We know that it was mostly on foot, mostly traveling at night, mostly sticking to north-south streams and the woods. It is remarkable that she made it. Over the next 11 years, Harriet would return to the Eastern Shore in Virginia at least 8 times to escort other fugitive slaves to freedom. Complicating her task was the Fugitive Slave Act, known in the South as the Bloodhound Act. This act, passed by Congress in 1850, required Northerners to turn in escaped slaves. Harriet now faced danger north and south. In her trips to rescue slaves and transport them to Canada, Harriet did not work alone. She was part of a secret network known as the Underground Railroad. The railroad had no rails, and except for the occasional hidden basement, it had no underground. Rather, it was a series of safe houses strung out along routes that extended from the slave border states to Canada. The safe houses were owned by people, white and black, who hated slavery and hated the Fugitive Slave Act. This mini Q includes documents on Harriet's work with the Underground Railroad, but Harriet Tubman's life, which stretched over 90 years, was larger than this. Examine all the documents, consider the importance of each undertaking, the number of people helped, the risks involved, the time devoted. Then decide on your answer to the question, what was Harriet Tubman's greatest achievement? So once you finish reading this document, you will scroll down and answer some background essay questions. Please write and complete sentences and type your answers into the boxes. So the first one, you could say the border state that Harriet Tubman was born in was, that could be your first sentence, right? And that is it. After you answer those questions, that is it for this document. There is a timeline going through Harriet Tubman's life, which is pretty interesting. Let me know if you have any questions.